Thank you, everyone, for coming out. I'm Moss Turpan. I'm the managing editor of Epiphany. Epiphany, for those of you who don't know, is a biannual literary magazine that's been based here in Manhattan for the last 15 years or so. And we're very happy to have you all in Strand's Rare Book Room tonight. Strand has been here for about 90 years now, and this is one of my favorite places to see a reading in the city. We're always really happy to be here. I'm going to bring up Tracy O'Neill, who's the editor-in-chief of Epiphany, to say a few words about the magazine and introduce our readers. Thanks again for coming.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming out to launch the new issue of Epiphany. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tracy O'Neill, editor-in-chief of the magazine. I began work with Epiphany last July, and a little shy of 1 year in, there is so much to celebrate. This year, 3 of our writers were nominated for PEN Literary Awards. We expanded our offerings online. One of our online contributors, Joan Silber, received the National Book Critics Circle Award. Contributor Hannah Lilithasadi was honored by the Academy of Arts and Letters. And we established a new prize with the Authors Guild, the Breakout 8, that recognizes exciting new voices amongst student writers, both undergraduate and graduate. It's been especially exciting to work on this special double issue, which features a number of wonderful writers. We've got debut fiction, stories from writers whose fiction I'd long admired, poetry that takes on the housing crisis and splinters traditional notions of the line, reportage on a sex cult, and of course, writing by the honorees of our first ever Breakout 8 Writers Prize. There are several thank yous in order tonight. I'd like to thank the Authors Guild for co-sponsoring the Breakout 8, as well as fellow prize judges Hannah Tinty and Alexander Chi. I'd like to thank our tireless readers who give their time to finding writing that deserves attention, and our interns who bring new life to the magazine. I want to thank our board and our founder, Willard Cook, for their efforts to build a space for innovative literature, managing editor, Moss Turpan, who makes this magazine run, and our new assistant poetry editor, Andreas Serpa, whose insights I treasure. I want to thank those who have given to the magazine. Your donations have helped us to offer our contributors higher honorariums and work toward providing more space for writers. Finally, as always, I want to thank our contributors. It's an absolute privilege to get to work with you on the writing to which you've devoted so much care. Without further ado, I'll introduce our first reader tonight, Yuxi Lin. Yuxi Lin's writing has appeared or is forthcoming in the Washington Post, Spilled Milk, Cosmonauts Avenue, the Southern Review, and Tinderbox Poetry Journal. She graduated from Davidson College and is currently an MFA candidate at New York University, where she received the Lillian Vernon Fellowship. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be here tonight. Thank you so much, everyone at Epiphany, for making this possible. I'm so incredibly honored and happy to have proved to my parents that my poetry is liked by people. And also thank you for Authors Guild, and congratulations to all the winners of the Breakout 8 contest. So the first poem I'm going to read was inspired by a high school friend who worked at Barnes & Noble and accidentally shelved the Bible under the fiction section. Before man, there was woman. Praise her, for she is the mother of all worlds. And the woman said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him an helpmeet for him." And out of the ground she formed every beast in the field and every fowl of the air. The man turned a stick in the fire and branded the sheep. He whipped a cow into the ground and named it meat. Standing over the limp bodies, he said, "There is none equal to me." And the woman asked, "What would you have me make for you?" "Make me a god," he said, "if you love me. Make him in my image." The next two poems I'm going to read from the journal. The first one is called Etymology. In Chinese, the word for good is a woman with child, and the word for woman is a whole wobbling on two legs, or maybe take off the legs, and the child is a line leaning against another line slumped against a wall. And there's no daughter, only woman and man is strength holding up a field, or the field is crushing his back, doubled over, his hands in the dirt where ancestors wake unhurried. The father crossed as all fathers, his axe lifted at the mother, proffering empty breasts. But when you kneel, is it always prayer curling into someone's fist? And why do three women touching skin make the word wicked, but a single female body populates a whole country so lonely and dirty? They ask me what I want to be when I grow up, and I say good. Please let me be good, or even just half of it. So there's kind of a joke among poets about writing about your parents. They always say, there are poems you write after they've passed. I don't follow rules. This one's called Feast. I'm on a date with my father and all the men who claim to know what I needed. They blow smoke in my face and rub their bellies. What stained their mouths dark like that? They pass my face around and sip. When I was a girl, my mother made me eat without making noise. Swallow, she commanded. Her sorrow rolled down the napkin and stained the carpet. This is a world where food is solid and the animal is the one laid against a doily. Why then do I envy the dog licking its plate clean? The first time a boy put his hand in me and pronounced me sweet, the trance dulled nothing. I hid in the blue awning under my skin and watched him mold everything to the outline of his body. The men are teaching me appetite, that pain, like cake, is layered. And this is how you part a soul. Scrape its wet tip across someone else's lip and be savored. The buck's horns thrust out of the wall above my father's bent head. A wounded animal will try to convince you it's holy. Do not worship its crumbs. They will not offer sanctuary. The next poem I'll read is about being sick as a child, which I know for a lot of people is something that they remember. And it's a time when sometimes intimacy, emotional and physical, between parent and child is possible in certain families. Ode to the Flu. It was the only time he'd come near enough to press his humanness against my forehead and cheek. My body leaked out of me. In the stench of worry, he hoisted me onto his back. Hold on. I wanted to live there between his shoulder blades, the way Dionysus nested in Zeus's thigh until he was ready to be born, already beautiful and fully formed. Where was the seam I tore from the man lumbering through deserted streets, whose ragged breath carried mine? And I was sorry for my weight and the sleep he'd given up that day and the next day. O Flu, deliverer of madness and soft aches, pugilist inside skull and ribcage, you bruise me in a lovely way. But I feel loved most when violence is inflicted outside my own body, as when he yelled for the nurse to go kill herself for having stabbed me and not found a vein. How I prayed the steroids pumping into my blood would make me more like him. In the throbbing fluorescent hallway, he stared into my dilated eyes as if he knew me and was my father. There he let me see him, then he turned away. The last poem I'll read is a love poem. The Gardener. The tree inside the man I love grows to places I can't touch. Blue branch from his palm to fingertip, groove of clavicle, gnarled ridge at his throat. Where I can still reach, a fist of leaves comes away with my hand. He's shedding his dark shame. He too had never learned to cherish himself, sustained on hunger the shape of his own fruit bent to water. I want to taste what he drinks. Like a thief, I bury my rib in the dirt of his dream and grow myself there, insinuate a symbiosis, unfurl into his breath my unremarkable whorls. But I'm remembered each time he calls my body by its name. There's a tongue for this language, the bloom he makes of my twisted stem. That I had a name and veins and therefore music was why I wanted to live inside him, so I could not harm him from the outside, where I hold him by the calyx, thumb and forefinger tugging the root of desire from soil, or what I've been told is the proper way to behead a rose and preserve its perfume. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuxi. Next up will be Collin Frazier. Collin Frazier studies creative writing in the New School's MFA program. A former modern dancer, he lives in Brooklyn and was born in Detroit. And Your Enemy's Closer, which appears in this issue of Epiphany, is his first published work of fiction.
So before I begin, I'd just like to extend a thank you to Tracy and to Moss and to everyone at Epiphany. It was really great working with them, and they've definitely produced a wonderful magazine, so thank you very much. So this is the opening scene of the story which appears in this issue, and it's entitled, And Your Enemy's Closer. I seen his bracelet the first time he came in the store. He wasn't wearing a lot of jewelry, not like me. Fat silver rings, leather bands, and chains looped to match vicious boots. It was towards the end of the night, and business was slow. He slid the hollow VHS case across the counter, and I seen his bracelet for a second, wrapped around his sandalwood wrist. Most of the beads was smooth, with some pits in it, like he'd had it for a long time, except one bead that had a face on it and looked like some gnarly old man frowning, or a demon sneer or something. Shit was weird, but I liked it. I glanced up, and he was looking at me. Ain't say not one word, just looked at me. Water dripping from his hair. Then he looked away, at some candy by the register. I grabbed the case off the counter, read the code, and went to find the matching cassette on the wall behind me. The wall had these recesses in it, so I pretended to be searching and just ducked into one of them nooks to peep this boy. He was new to the neighborhood, definitely. Looked 16, 17 maybe, around my age. His thin shape matched the delicate hand, a wide nose and these delicious, full lips. Nothing out of balance with his features, but nothing I'd seen before either. It was something. I pulled the video. When I was walking back to the register, I seen he was looking towards the door at the rain. I glanced out the window, through my reflection, and I swear it was somebody in the parking lot. They was just standing there in the wind and rain, hunched over like they had some heavy shit on their back, but they wasn't carrying nothing. It was dark, and rain was coming down like crazy, but they was smiling at me. This yellow sickle of twisted teeth flashing under a couple parking lamps. I shook my head. Folks is crazy out there, I said, giggling a little. It's a nervous thing. I hate it. Gotta keep your eyes open. You know what I'm saying? He nodded. Number? He murmured his membership number. If I wasn't waiting so intently to hear his voice, I'd have missed it. Niran? I asked, even though I knew he wasn't Niran Watanabe, because that was the quiet older dude that owned the Thai restaurant a couple doors down in the plaza. Niran usually came in late too and rented from the room in the back when his wife wasn't with him. That's my father. I'm Samchai. His name wasn't on the account, but he knew the number, so he was probably telling the truth. Wasn't nobody else he could really be, I guessed. How come I ain't seen you around before? I wasn't trying to give him shit or nothing, so I smiled, trying to get him to smile too, but when he looked at me, I clammed up. My smile shrunk and my hands were sweaty. I was at school, but I'm helping out the restaurant before I go to college. Shit, I didn't even finish high school. So, you'll be around this summer then? He kind of nodded, swiped some hair out of his eyes. He seemed somewhere between nervous and together, which was somewhere better than me, wherever that was. The counter between us felt too wide, like no matter how far I stretched my arms, I wouldn't never be able to touch him. So, I said, say I give you this movie for free. Can you bring it back tomorrow? I smiled again, afraid to look at him. I was at work, and I know this guy, and I want to push too hard, because maybe he wasn't. But maybe he was. Maybe. I wiped my palms on my jeans and looked at the computer. He smiled back, a spark across his lips gone almost before I could notice it. Then he nodded. I read the title of the tape when I handed it to him. The Crying Game? I said. I know what it was about, but it didn't sound all that fun. You like sad movies, huh? He slid the tape off the counter and turned to leave. I like stories we're afraid of, he said. He kept walking till he got to the door and turned back when he pulled it open. If they're sad, he started, but he didn't finish. He shrugged and walked outside, and I thought about how my mama would have liked him too, probably. When he turned toward the restaurant, Gindi, I seen that the cycle creep was gone. Samchai walked past the pink and blue neon sign in the window that said, Anytime Video, and his skin lit up. Beautiful cotton candy through the Rain Street glass. Thank you.
Thank you, Collin. That was great. Next up is Yesenia Montilla, a poet and translator. Her poetry has appeared in Gulf Coast, Prairie Schooner, and elsewhere. She received her MFA in Poetry and Translation from Drew University and is a CantoMundo Fellow. The Pink Box, her first collection, was published by Willow Books and was longlisted for the PEN Open Book Award in 2016. Thank you.
Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? Thank you Epiphany and everyone that works at Epiphany for the honor of taking my work, especially Andres Serpa, who was responsible for poetry, and he saw something in that one poem, and I appreciate you so much. I'm gonna start off with the poem that I always start off with, which is called Dendrology. And dendrology is the study of trees, but it's a poem about hair. And for women, hair is really political, but for women of color, it's even more so. And so this is my hair poem, Dendrology. The summer of '77, I learned the Spanish phrase, pelo malo, when my aunt announced I'd never be loved by a white man, con ese pelo malo. I loved my hair, the way it frizzed around the edges of my face and stood there like a woman waiting to be asked to dance a slow bolero, a jumping rumba. I was 3 years old, didn't know much of love then. The orange tree that stood in my aunt's yard became my first lover. I would wrestle with its tender branches, hoist my small frame around its tubby brown trunk, thick as a liana, or a man's waist. I wonder now if every lover in my bed is some ways a representation of that orange tree and those words I heard in that Miami heat about the way love can be so damn fickle that the texture of my hair would wilt a pink-crotched man, make him recoil from my locks. Today, I still do have a fondness for trees, all of them, with their deep roots and their heartwood, the alamedas holding rows of them, singing, shading my unruly hair, reminding me that once I was told there would never be an arboretum in my future, that I'd never have the gift of choices, bonsai, white birch, redwood. This poem is about borders and how I wish they didn't exist. And it's for the poet Marcelo Hernandez Castillo. So maps for Marcelo. Some maps have blue borders, like the blue of your name, or the tributary lacing of veins running through your father's hands. And how the last time I saw you, you held me for so long. I saw whole lifetimes flooding by me, small tentacles reaching for both our faces. I wish maps would be without borders and that we belonged to no one and to everyone at once. What a world that would be. Or not a world, maybe we would call it something more intrinsic, like forgiving, or something simplistic, like river or dirt. And if I were to see you tomorrow and everyone you came from had disappeared, I would weep with you and drown out any black lines that this earth allowed us to give it. Because what is a map but a useless prison? We are all so lost, and no naming of blank spaces can save us. And what is a map but the delusion of safety? The line is drawn, is always in the sand, and folds on itself before we're done making it. And that line there, south of El Rio, how it dares to cover up the bodies, as though we would forget who died there and for what, as if we could forget that if you spin a globe and stop it with your finger, you'll land it on top of someone living, someone who was not expecting to be crushed by thirst. So thank you again, Andres, for choosing this poem. I'm going to read the poem that's in Epiphany. Everyone should pick up a copy. Please, please do. Support artists, support small presses, support small journals. This is called On Falling in Love with a White Man. To fall is to be one with your ancestors. This is to say that the act of losing your footing is to inherit the questionable undertaking of bad romance. In the natural world, you would not coax a sloth to be swift or a bird to stop its song, and yet the falling is not what is problematic, it's the who with. I do not want to be the tree in the woods that no one hears fall. I also don't want an axe to be taken to my body, sweet ache, before the topple. He took an axe to me once, and now I am but kindling, and each time he calls, it is a match lit near my throat, and each time he sends word, it is like being set on fire and then rebuilt. This way, I am a colonized body, used as a commodity to a thankless master. I started out as a servant because I knew no better. Today, I am a city with a hospital and a police force, a fire department too, so I can put myself out. I'm gonna end with this poem. talking to the incredible poet Kathy Engel, who's right here in the audience, about Gaza. I felt like this is the poem I wanted to end with. And so this is No More Love Poems. I'm not writing any more love poems. What's the use? You're not biting. My metaphors are weakened anyway. You throw away my images as though they were a sneeze. No more love poems when I look at you as though you were a newborn and you insist on calling me sister instead of love or baby. I'm not going to write any more love poems. Instead, I'll write political ones about my body because my body is the most political thing I own. No more love poems when I had to sit next to Joy Harjo and hear her say, please, please, I fear for my life. Not one more, because on any given night, while I touch myself to sleep thinking of you, families in Gaza are being dragged from their beds, thrown in the dirt, and executed without a last look at each other's faces in moonlight. Because 238 girls went missing once, because imaginary borders, because Chicago is always a war zone, because Jordan, because Trayvon, because Eric, because Michael, because Ferguson was on fire, and I can't watch the world burn while I dream about lions at the zoo. No more love poems, because shouldn't love for all be a condition of peace? Not one more, because in my world, we kill each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Yesenia. All right, so for our final reader tonight, we have Lore Segal. Lore Segal has won a Guggenheim Fellowship, 2 Penn O. Henry Awards, the American Academy and Institute of Arts and Letters Award, a fellowship at the Dorothy and Lewis B. Cullman Center for Scholars and Writers, and is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. A novelist and recognized author of children's books, Segal has also written for The New Yorker, The New York Times Book Review, The New Republic, and Harper's, amongst others. Please welcome Lore.
Thank you, Epiphany, and thank you all, writers and especially readers and listeners. Our story is called Days of Martinis and Forgetting, and has an epigram, How Pleasant the Sight of a Cheerful Old Person, by Anonymous. I know it's anonymous because I wrote it. Love your stole, Lottie said to the handsome old woman at the party. It's grand and it's beautiful. The woman thanked Lottie while her, hold on, I can't see it, that's why I can't see it. The woman thanked Lottie while her eyes flicked subliminally to the left. She did not recognize Lottie, nor could Lottie abort the identical tell on her own face to save her children's heads. She could not have said if she had forgotten the woman's name or had never laid eyes on her. Lottie walked with a cane, and the woman in the stole offered to get her a drink. Oh, thank you, no, I'm really fine, Lottie told her. I can get it myself. Lottie was happy to see Bessie by the coat rack and walked over. Bessie said, I'm getting to stow my cane. It has a way of tripping people. You made it in from Rockingham, Lottie said. Made it in, Bessie said. How is Collin? Collin is well enough. Collin is all right. Bessie must have known that her friends could not stand Collin, the only one of the husbands still living. Collin owned houses, cars, talked about the inadequacy of the parking, and was dying of something slow and ravaging. Who is the old woman in the red stole? Lottie asked Bessie. Your hostess, Sylvia, said Bessie, and added that she was surprised to see Lottie. Why are you surprised? The third time I called you to ask for the address, you were understandably irritable. The address of the Baskin party, and you said you were not going. Yes, well, Lottie said, the prospect of leaving my apartment brings on an initial desire to take my Kindle and go to bed. A small agoraphobia, but I like parties. If you want to call this a party, I hope they do martinis, said Bessie. Why isn't it a party? Asked Lottie, following her friend, who seemed to know the geography of the handsome apartment in the high Bauhaus style. They were intercepted by an unusually large, a younger man at any rate, who kissed Bessie and said, has anybody seen Sylvia? Who was that? Lottie asked Bessie. Don't know, said Bessie. Reminds me of the 70s when one kept getting hugged by students who had come out from behind their beards. And who is Sylvia? Your hostess, the woman in the stole, Bessie said. Drinks were in the kitchen, where Bessie was drawn into conversation with people she knew. Lottie put out her hand to an old man standing by himself. She said, my late husband and I had an agreement. Every party we went to, we would talk to at least one person we didn't know. And today is my lucky day. The old man had a nice face. Those were the days, said Lottie, of wine and roses, the old man said. I was going to say, when I used to know 80% of the people at a party. Today I know 2 people. That's doing better than I by 1, he said. Tell me the 2 you know. My friend Bessie, whom I've known for over half a century, and the woman in the beautiful red stole whom I just talked with. That's the one I know. She's my sister, said the man. Ruthie was our aunt. I've come in from Albany. A quarter turn brought the large younger man who had kissed Bessie into the conversation. We are talking about all the people we don't know, Lottie told him. The younger man said, I'm developing an algorithm that will interpret the musculature of any face of the person you're talking with and tell you who they are and how you know them. Bessie came with 2 martinis, one for Lottie and one for herself. She said, let's sit down. I can't stand so long. And just in time, I've just used up my conversation starters, Lottie told her. They carried their drinks to a comfortable sofa and sat down. Lottie asked Bessie, one more time, tell me the name of our hostess. Sylvia. I talked with her brother. That's Sebastian, said Bessie. Who is Ruthie? Ruth Berger, said Bessie. Sylvia and Sebastian's aunt, who always reminded me of that New Yorker cartoon. Mortimer was her first husband and her second novel. And you still like parties? Bessie asked Lottie. I do. Bessie said, I remember when we used to go in expectation always that somebody was going to happen. What do I get dressed for today? What do I come in from Rockingham for? People, said Lottie, conversation. And have you had a good conversation today? Not that kind of conversation. It's like the old balls. You take a turn with one partner and take a turn with another partner. And are you having a good time? Yes, I am. Bessie was looking around the room. The set of her face told Lottie that Collin was not well enough, was not all right. What makes this today a good time for you, Bessie asked Lottie. Let's see. For one, my children, so far as I know, are well and modestly solvent. 2, my right knee does not hurt. 3, I enjoyed looking at, what's her name again? Sylvia. Looking at Sylvia's splendid red stole, and her brother, Sebastian, has a nice face. I like being in these handsome rooms and sitting on a comfortable sofa, drinking a good martini and I like talking with you, with the sound of a party going on in back of me. The sound of a shiver, said Bessie. Shiver, what shiver? Bessie said, this is a shiver for Sylvia and Sebastian's Aunt Ruth Berger. It is? I forget who said that what wakes and funerals are the cocktail parties of the old. Guys, this is an applause for all of these people who never got their applause.